You're being ridiculous, Mia. Eric needs this more than you do. My mother snapped, thrusting the deed in my face as if that would somehow erase my right to the home I had paid for. He has a family to support. What do you have? Just yourself. The words landed like a slap, sharp and humiliating. I stood frowned in the kitchen of the house I had sacrificed everything for, the weight of betrayal settling in my chest like a stone. My name is Mia Reynolds. I'm 33 years old, and I never thought my own family would steal from me. For 10 years, I had poured my life into my work as a nurse at Memorial Hospital, pulling double shifts, working through holidays, skipping vacations all to save for a home of my own. When my parents were on the brink of foreclosure, I stepped in without hesitation, handing over my entire life savings in $175,000 so they could start fresh. The agreement had been simple. The house would be in my name, my money, my investment, my future. But now, standing in what was supposed to be my home, I realized just how little promises meant to my family. Eric, my stepbrother and my mother's favorite child, stood nearby, smug as ever. At 38, he had never lifted a finger to help our parents. He had spent years jumping from one failed venture to another: a car wash, a supplement company, a cryptocurrency scam, always cushioned by their endless support. And now, with a pregnant wife and no stability of his own, he was being handed my house on a silver platter. We've already filed the paperwork, my stepfather, George, added, not even bothering to look at me. The house is in Eric's name now. You should be happy you're helping your brother build a future. A cold fury crept through me. I had dreamed of this house colonial-style home on Maple Street. I had imagined Christmases by the fireplace, Sunday mornings with coffee on the porch. I had spent weeks picking out paint colors, furniture, and tiny details that made it feel like mine. Now, it was being handed over to someone who hadn't earned it. I skimmed the room, taking in the guests who had come to celebrate, the family members suddenly avoiding my eyes, whispers passing between them, and Sarah, the only one who had ever truly supported me, stood in the corner shaking her head. My best friend Rachel, who had watched me work myself into exhaustion for this, gripped her glass so tightly I thought it might break. "This isn't right," I said, my voice shaking. "That money was everything I had. We had an agreement." My mother rolled her eyes. "Oh, stop being so dramatic. You're a nurse, you'll save it up again. Eric needs a stable home for his baby. It's not like you have anyone to take care of." Something inside me snapped. Years of being the responsible one, the selfless one, the one who never asked for anything gone. Just like that, I had sacrificed my time, my energy, my dreams, and for what? To be tossed aside at the moment it became convenient. I wasn't going to let this happen. Growing up, I had always known I was second to Eric in my mother's eyes. When my father died, she remarried George within a year, and suddenly, Eric became the center of their universe. While I worked after school and saved for college, Eric got new cars, expensive clothes, and endless do-overs. When my parents called me 6 months ago, desperate and out of options, I had let hope cloud my judgment. I had ignored the secretive phone calls, the delays in paperwork, the way they kept me out of meetings with their lawyer. I had believed them when they said we were a family. Rachel had tried to warn me. "Get everything in writing," she had told me. I don't trust them. But I had trusted them. And now, they had stolen my future. Eric strode past me with his wife, Jessica, already discussing renovations, his voice grating against my raw nerves. "We'll probably get the kitchen first," he mused, running a hand along the granite countertop I had picked out. "Maybe knock down the wall or to really make it our own." My stomach twisted. That's when I saw it. The folder. A Saturday on top of the refrigerator where my mother always kept important documents. The same folder I had seen when we made our original agreement. While they were distracted, I grabbed it and slipped it into my bag. "I need some air," I muttered to Rachel. Outside, under the porch light, I pulled out the paperwork with shaking hands. My original agreement stating in black and white that the house was supposed to be mine was right there. Then, another document caught my eye. A letter from their lawyer. Dated 2 weeks ago. A warning that transferring the deed without my consent could be considered fraud. My phone buzzed. A text from my mother. Stop sulking outside. Come back in and be happy for your brother. I exhaled slowly. That was the moment I knew. This wasn't just about the money. This was about fighting for myself. I texted Marcus, Rachel's brother, a real estate attorney. Are you free tomorrow? I need legal help. His response was instant. Rachel told me what happened. Come in at 9 a.m., bring everything. I squared my shoulders and walked back inside. My mother, George, and Eric were huddled together, probably making more plans for my stolen house. They looked up as I entered, irritation flickering across their faces. Finally decided to stop being dramatic, my mother asked. I smiled. Actually, I want to thank you, I said, my voice calm. You've helped me see things very clearly. Confusion flickered in her eyes. Eric laughed. Say, she'll get over it. I met his gaze, unflinching. No, Eric, I won't get over it. But you'll wish I had. The next morning, I sat in Marcus's office, clutching a coffee cup as if it could steady my racing heart. The walls of his office, lined with books and legal certificates, suddenly felt too tight. Marcus was going through the documents spread across his desk with a quiet focus, his pen scratching across paper as he made occasional notes. I could feel the weight of each moment stretch on, my thoughts swirling, a constant hum of anxiety in my head. Finally, after what seemed like an eternity, he looked up, a small, knowing smile tugged at the corner of his lips. Mia, they really messed up here, he said, holding up the lawyer's warning letter like it was a smoking gun. The deed transfer isn't just questionable, it's fraudulent. You provided the down payment, you signed the initial paperwork, and there's clear documentation of your agreement. They can't legally give away a house that was meant to be yours. My throat tightened, and I swallowed hard. They already did, I said, my voice cracking. The deed's in Eric's name. Marcus didn't miss a beat. A fraudulent transfer can't be reversed. I've got a friend at the DA's office who would be very interested in this case. What they did could lead to criminal charges. My chest tightened at his words. Criminal charges. I didn't want my parents caught up in a legal mess. Even after everything, the thought of seeing them face consequences like that made me hesitate. Listen to me, Marcus said, leaning forward, his tone firm but not unkind. They stole $175,000 from you. That's grand theft. What they did is fraud. And from these bank statements, it looks like they even forged your signature on some of these documents. They're counting on you being too nice to fight back. And I was nice my whole life. I had been the reliable one who always stepped in, always sacrificed, always tried to do the right thing. They had always counted on that. Marcus's words hit hard, cutting through the haze of indecision. What do you want to do? He asked, his voice gentle but with an undercurrent of urgency. I took a shaky breath, a fire beginning to burn in my chest. I want my house back, and I want them to understand they can't treat me like this anymore. Marcus nodded and immediately started typing on his computer. I'm filing an emergency injunction to prevent them from making any changes to the property. Then we'll proceed with legal action to void the transfer. They'll be served with papers by tomorrow. As I left his office, I felt lighter somehow. For the first time since the housewarming party, I wasn't shaking, wasn't on the verge of tears. Instead, a strange calm had settled over me, quiet certainty that I was no longer powerless. At work later that evening, the ICU was a blur of urgent care and constant motion, but my phone was alive with notifications, texts from my mom and Eric, frantic and panicked, 7 missed calls from Eric, 12 from my mother. The last text from Eric made my lip twitch into a smile. What the hell did you do? I silenced my phone and turned my focus back to my patients. Let them panic, let them feel a fraction of the anxiety they had made me live with. Tomorrow, they will see what happens when you push the nice daughter too far. The next morning, as I was getting ready for my shift, my phone buzzed again. This time it was Rachel. Mia, they're outside your apartment. Your mom and Eric are causing a scene. I glanced out my window, and sure enough, there they were. Eric was pacing back and forth, his face red with frustration. My mom was hammering on the front door, her fist pounding like it could break the walls down. I took a deep breath and went downstairs to face them. You have to stop this, my mom shouted as soon as she saw me. This would tear our family apart. I almost laughed, the bitterness rising in my throat. That's rich, I replied, my voice unnervingly calm. You didn't worry about tearing the family apart when you stole my life savings. Eric stepped forward, his face contorted with anger. You're being ridiculous. I have a baby on the way. What were you going to do with that house? Anyway, live there alone with your cats. I pulled out my phone and raised an eyebrow. Actually, I have the proof of our original agreement right here. Want to see the letter from your lawyer warning you this was illegal? Or should we talk about the documents where someone forged my signature? Their faces drained of color. My mom lunged forward, grabbing my arm, her voice dropping to a whisper. Mia, honey, we can work this out as a family. There's no need for lawyers. I gently removed her hand, a new strength in my voice. We stopped being a family the moment you decided my life savings meant nothing to you. The DA's office has copies of everything now. So, unless you want this to get a lot worse, I suggest you talk to your lawyer about reversing the deed transfer. Her eyes filled with tears, but I no longer felt the pull of guilt. You sent your own mother to jail, she gasped. No, ma'am, I said firmly, my voice unwavering. You might send yourself to jail. I'm just standing up for myself. Before she could say another word, Eric's phone rang. It was his wife, Jessica. I could hear her voice, panicked, through the speaker. The police are at our house. They have questions about the deed transfer. They left in a hurry after that, the weight of their mistake settling heavily on their shoulders. Rachel, who had been watching from her car, rushed over and hugged me tightly. I've never seen you stand up to them like that, she said, pride shining in her eyes. I've never had proof of their manipulation before, I replied softly, always just my word against theirs, but this time, I have everything in writing. That afternoon, Marcus called. They've reached out. Your parents and Eric's lawyer still want to settle. They'll transfer the house back to you, cover your legal fees, and even pay additional damages. The threat of criminal charges had finally made them see I wasn't going to back down. Should we take the deal? Marcus asked. Yes, I said, my voice firm, but I want something else. I want them to sign a statement admitting exactly what they did. They don't get to pretend this never happened. 2 weeks later, I Saturday in Marcus's office once again, but this time, I wasn't the one feeling small. My parents and Eric Saturday across from me, their faces pale as they signed the papers. The deed was being transferred back to me, along with a settlement that included my legal fees and an additional $50,000 in damages. But the most important part of the settlement was the notarized statement they signed, acknowledging their attempt to defraud me. For the first time in my life, I wasn't the one left holding the broken pieces. This time, I was the one who held the power. And I was done being invisible. My mom couldn't stop crying, dabbing at her eyes with a tissue, while George stared at the floor. Eric looked like he'd aged 10 years, his smug grin long gone, replaced by a clenched jaw. His wife, Jessica, had left him after finding out about the financial mess he'd been hiding. Apparently, the house theft was just the beginning. I need all parties to sign here, the notary said, pointing to the final page. One by one, they signed. When it was my turn, I took a breath and signed without hesitation. My hand didn't shake at all. I hope you're happy, Eric muttered as he stood up. You've ruined everything. No, I replied calmly. You ruined everything when you decided to steal from me. I just made it right. They filed out of the office, my mom trying one last time to catch my eye. I turned away, resolute. The time for guilt trips and manipulation was over. Marcus handed me the new deed with a proud smile. Congratulations, the house is officially yours. But I had one last surprise for them. Actually, I said, pulling out another set of papers, I'd like to sell it. My family had already spread word about their misunderstanding with the house, trying to save face with relatives and friends. They didn't know I received an offer from a developer who wanted to turn the property into apartments. The offer was above market value, way above. They'll be furious when they find out, Rachel said later as we celebrated at our favorite coffee shop. They thought you'd let them stay there, she added with a grin. That's exactly why I'm selling, I replied. They need to understand they have no power over me anymore. The next day, I signed the papers to sell the house. The developer was thrilled, my real estate agent was thrilled, and I was finally free. The profit from the sale, combined with the settlement money, meant I could buy my dream cottage with a garden and still have savings left over. As I drove away from the closing, my phone buzzed with a voicemail from my mom. She was crying, saying she'd heard about the sale and begging me to call her back. I deleted it without listening to the end. Some might call it cruel, but I called it boundaries. For the first time in my life, I wasn't going to set myself on fire to keep them warm. Let them figure out their own lives. I had a cottage to furnish and a garden to plant. The weeks after selling the house were transformative. I found a charming cottage just outside the city, with a wraparound porch and enough yard space for the garden I'd always dreamed of. Rachel helped me move in, and together we painted the walls in soft, peaceful colors, nothing like the bold schemes my mom had always insisted were proper for a family home. My phone still lit up regularly with messages from family members. Some were angry, calling me selfish for selling the house without giving my parents a chance to work things out. Others tried guilt trips, telling me my mom cried herself to sleep at night. My Aunt Sarah was the only one who stood by me, telling the others they should be ashamed for what they'd done. I ran into your mom at the grocery store, Sarah told me over Sunday brunch. She was telling everyone who would listen about how ungrateful you are. But most people know the truth now. That statement you made them sign has made the rounds. I smiled, feeling a sense of vindication. No longer was I the difficult daughter who wouldn't help her brother. Now, I was the hardworking nurse whose family had tried to steal her savings. My mom's attempts to play victim weren't working anymore. Eric and Jessica officially separated, and he moved back in with our parents. I heard through the grapevine that he was working as a sales clerk at an electronics store, his first real job in years. Sometimes, I drove past their rental house on my way to work. It was a modest place, nothing like the home they tried to steal from me. It didn't bring me joy to see them struggling, but I did feel a quiet sense of justice. At work, things were looking up too. Once I stopped letting my family drain my energy and resources, I was able to focus on my career. I applied for and got a promotion to charge nurse, which came with better hours and a significant pay raise. My colleagues noticed the change in me. I smiled more, stood up for myself in meetings, and no longer accepted all the holiday shifts just because others had real families to spend time with. One evening, as I sat on my porch, watching the sunset and planning my garden, my mom's number flashed on my phone. Instead of the usual anxiety, I felt nothing but calm as I declined the call. Later, I listened to her voicemail. She was asking if I would help Eric with rent money, since things were so hard for him right now. I deleted the message and went back to my gardening catalog. I'd ordered seeds for tomatoes, cucumbers, and my favorite violets. The flower beds were already prepared, the soil rich and waiting for new life. In a way, it felt like a metaphor for my own life. I'd cleared out the weeds of toxic relationships and was ready to grow something beautiful. Rachel often joked that I should write a book called How to Stop Being a Doormat in 3 Easy Steps. Maybe she was right. All it took was losing my life savings, standing up to my family, and finally putting myself first. Simple, really. 6 months after selling the house, my life had settled into a peaceful rhythm. My garden was thriving, with the first tomatoes ripening on the vine and violets blooming in rows. I'd made friends with my neighbors, joined a local book club, and even started dating again, something I'd put off for years because my family demanded so much of my time and energy. The family drama hadn't completely disappeared, but I'd learned to manage it differently. My mom still tried to reach out regularly, especially when they needed money. Each time, I stuck to my boundaries. I'm not in a position to help, I'd say calmly. No matter how many tears or guilt trips followed, the phrase became my shield, protecting me from their manipulations. I wasn't the same person I had been before. I was stronger, healthier, and finally, in control of my own life. Eric's situation had worsened. Jessica filed for divorce, and my nephew's son was now living with her full-time. On top of that, she discovered Eric had taken out credit cards in her name, leaving her with mountains of debt. When she came to me for advice, I connected her with Marcus, who helped her navigate the legal mess. It felt good to help someone who genuinely deserved it, even if it was hard to watch her suffer. One Sunday morning, while I was tending to my garden, I noticed a familiar car pull into my driveway. My mom stepped out, looking older and more tired than I remembered. She had shown up unannounced, probably hoping to catch me off guard. "Your garden is beautiful," she said softly, hovering near the fence. "You always did have a way with plants." "Thank you," I replied, continuing to work with my flowers, my hands steady in the soil. "But you shouldn't be here without calling first." I know, she sighed. I miss you, honey, and I wanted to tell you that your father and I are selling our house. We can't afford it anymore, and Eric's expenses," she trailed off, looking at me hopefully, the same look that used to twist my heart. I stood up, brushing dirt from my knees. "Ma'am, I'm not giving you money. That chapter is closed." "I wasn't asking for it," she started, then stopped herself. "Okay, maybe I was, but can't you blame me for helping? You're doing so well, and we're your family." "Family doesn't steal from family," I said firmly, feeling the words sink in. "Family doesn't forge signatures or justify theft because one child deserves it more. You made your choice, ma'am. Now, you're living with the consequences." She laughed in tears, but I didn't feel guilty. Instead, I felt proud of maintaining my boundaries. That evening, I hosted a small dinner party for Rachel, Sarah, and some friends from work. As we sat today on my porch, drinking wine and watching fireflies dance in the garden, I realized something profound. This was what family really looked like. It wasn't about blood or obligation. It was about choice, respect, and genuine care for each other. "To boundaries," Rachel toasted, raising her glass with a knowing smile. "To growth," I added, thinking of my flourishing garden and my even more flourishing spirit. 1 year later, a year has passed since I stood up to my family, and the transformation in my life still amazes me. My cottage has become a sanctuary, filled with the peace and warmth I never felt in my family's presence. My garden produced so many vegetables last summer that I started donating extras to the local food bank. Sometimes, I think about how my mom used to mock my love for gardening, calling it a waste of time. Now, it brings me joy and helps others, too. My career has flourished without the constant drain of family emergencies. I was recently promoted to nursing supervisor, and my colleagues often comment on how much more confident I've become. I no longer apologize for taking vacation days or saying no to extra shifts when I need rest. Setting boundaries at home taught me to set them everywhere else, too. Rachel jokes that I'm becoming a bit of a local legend at the hospital. New nurses seek me out for advice not just about patient care, but about standing up for themselves in difficult situations. Last week, a young nurse thanked me for helping her find the courage to leave an abusive relationship. "If you could stand up to your whole family," she said, "I can't stand up to one person." My parents and Eric still struggle, but that's no longer my burden to bear. They made their choices, just as I made mine. Sometimes, the kindest thing you can do for both yourself and others is to let them face the consequences of their actions. It's not about revenge anymore. It's about growth and self-respect. The money they stole was just money, but what I gained by standing up to them was priceless, my freedom and my self-worth. The other day, I found an old photo of my family at a housewarming party taken just before everything fell apart. Looking at their smug faces, I realized something surprising. I don't feel angry anymore. Instead, I feel grateful. Their betrayal pushed me to become someone Strong or someone who values herself enough to walk away from toxic relationships, even when they're wrapped in the package of family. A new season. Spring has arrived, and my garden is starting to bloom again. Sarah visits often, bringing her grandchildren, who love helping me plant new flowers. Rachel and I have our weekly coffee dates, laughing about how far I've come from the person who used to answer every demanding phone call from my family. Even Jessica brings my nephew over sometimes. She says the garden has a healing effect on her, too. Life isn't perfect, but it's authentically mine now. I've learned that sometimes the best revenge isn't about getting even. It's about getting better. Every flower that blooms in my garden, every peaceful evening on my porch, every boundary I maintain is all a reminder that I chose myself. And I'd do it again in a heartbeat.